Good morning, City Hall. Hi, everybody. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's 1 o'clock here at City Hall. The pause in my right there was that my computer just said it might restart in a minute, whether I like it or not. So be warned, councillors, that's happening. My name is Wayne Mason. I'm the councillor for District 7, Halifax South Downtown, and I'm the chair of this committee. I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. We'll start with a land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaty signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. Today, I see that we are joined by Councillor Trish Purdy, by Councillor Sean Cleary, by Councillor Patty Cuddle, by Vice Chair Pam Lovelace, and Councillor Tim Outthit. We have a full house, and our very special guest today is Paul Russell, Councillor for Sackville. Thank you for joining us today. We'll move on to approval of the minutes of January 26, 2023. I need a mover for those. Moved by Councillor Cuddle, seconded by Vice Chair Lovelace. Any further discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries. Next, we'll move to approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Madam Clerk.
There's been no additions or deletions from the clerk's office.
Very good. Do members of committee have anything? Moved by Councillor Lovelace, seconded by, order of business. We're doing order of business. Yeah. Yeah, you got something? Well, if you turn your mic on.
Yeah, okay.
We have a late entrant from the staff representative.
Just from a staff efficiency point of view, I was wondering if the committee would entertain just a slight change to the order of business. We have HRP supporting Spring Garden Road today, so if we can maybe look at doing Spring Garden Road first, and then Hammonds Plain, followed by the transit KPIs, if that's okay with committee. That would be allow the most staff to free up as quick as possible.
Sure. That works for me. It means Councillor Russell has to stay until the KPIs, but if you're all right with that. Is there any objection to that order of business? We'll start with 12.1.3 Spring Garden, and then we will go to Hammonds Plains Road, Lucasville Road, 12.1.1, then the transit KPIs. All right, so do I have a motion to move as amended, moved by Councillor Lovelace, seconded by Councillor Cleary? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All those in favor? We have an order of business. I should write down the changes we just made. All right, there we go. Perfect. No, you're more than welcome. So, business arising out of the minutes. There is none. Call for declaration of conflict of interest. Members of the committee. Seeing none, we'll move on. There are no motions of reconsideration or rescission or deferred business or tabled matters. That brings us to item 10, correspondence, petitions, delegations. Madam Clerk.
Correspondence has been received for item 12.1.3. It has been circulated to all members of the committee, and no petitions from the clerk's office.
Very good. Do any members of the committee have a petition? Seeing none, there's no presentations today, no information items brought forward today, which brings us quite quickly to 12.1.3 Spring Garden Road Transit Priority Corridor. Who do we have from staff to present on that today?
Good afternoon. My name is Jason Janae. I'm a project manager with Halifax Transit in the Transit Planning Division, and I'm here to present to you on the Spring Garden Road Transit Priority Corridor. In December of 2021, Regional Council directed staff to proceed with a daytime transit-only transit priority corridor on Spring Garden Road between South Park Street and Queen Street for June of 2022. The pilot was implemented in July of 2022, but after 5 days in operation, the pilot was paused. Back in September of 2022, TSC directed staff to conduct an operational review and to develop an updated implementation approach for a transit priority corridor for spring of 2023. The previously considered transit priority corridor and the proposed today includes the same area, Spring Garden Road, between South Park Street and Queen Street, as you can see on the screen there. Just quickly getting into the project objectives. This project is a great opportunity to not only get a better understanding of how Spring Garden Road can function as a transit corridor and how the pedestrian realm can be enhanced, but it's important in the broader context of future BRT, bus rapid transit implementation. Bus rapid transit implementation will result in trade-offs being made within the right-of-way. We can learn how prioritizing transit on a busy commercial street can impact things like transit performance, pedestrian and user experience, road safety and compliance, and the local businesses through this pilot project. It's also a great opportunity to test some of the tools that we're looking to implement for BRT. Staff completed an operational review for the transit priority corridor, which considers the fundamental parameters of a transit priority corridor, operational period, traffic control measures, and enforcement. And I'll walk you through the findings of those three parameters. Broadly, a time-based transit priority corridor generally provides greater operational flexibility to the municipality. It restricts vehicles when volumes are highest, but it limits potential disruptions for businesses for activities such as waste collection. It also limits the need for special exemptions, which may also create communications and regulatory challenges in a 24/7 situation. And finally, it adds those eyes on the streets during off-peak hours, which may increase sense of security. When looking at the actual length of the pilot itself, 12 months would be ideal in terms of understanding the year-round impacts of the transit priority corridor, but looking at a possible minimum of 6 months in terms of the ability to collect, analyze, and report data and findings back to Transportation Standing Committee and Regional Council. We also looked at the traffic control measures that are possible for the implementation. And then when looking at them, there was definitely a need to balance the functionality and implementation cost, given that the project is temporary in nature. The findings suggest that additional traffic control measures are needed to the approach that was taken in July of 2022. But a fully robust implementation is limited because of the infrastructure requirements, and it wouldn't necessarily be appropriate for a pilot. We looked at automatic gates, but unfortunately these have high technological and programming costs, and they're operationally prohibitive, especially in terms of detection and timing. This is a challenge that Halifax Transit currently faces at existing terminals, and how the detection of the gates themselves and the timing actually creates challenges for buses moving through the gating systems. We also looked at traffic signal adjustments, so actually adding potential signal heads to the intersection, so a dedicated left, dedicated right, and a bus bike only signal. But unfortunately, this would require significant programming, not to mention a structural review of the loading capacity of the arms and poles that are existing today. It's also unclear if there's a suitable solution that would be clear for road users. Other tools like regulatory signage, pavement markings, temporary barriers using cones or barrels, all represent viable options for traffic control in the pilot scenario. And then finally, we looked at traffic lane reassignments, and this is kind of adjusting existing lane configurations, and we found that these are needed to ensure people don't get stuck in traffic lanes whose movement is prohibited. Lastly, like I said, we looked at enforcement, and HRM is limited in its ability to enforce the regulations of a transit-only pilot. Halifax Regional Police must be either at the site, either as dedicated enforcement or as part of regular patrols to enforce the regulations of the pilot. Other groups and bodies can assist, but they can't enforce the regulations needed for the pilot. Having police presence at the project site will face similar challenges in this iteration as it did in 2022. Dedicated shifts to enforce the transit-only pilot come from extra duty, which are voluntary, so therefore they may not be filled. Another tool that we looked at, photo radar, isn't possible for implementation to enforce transit lane misuse. With that, we took what we found and developed an implementation approach for spring 2023, and we've made changes to last year's approach to augment traffic control and really simplify the pilot from a communications perspective. So this starts with moving the start time from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., creating a 12-hour pilot, kind of that symmetry. It's just easier for people to understand 12 hours instead of 13 hours, and looking at a 6-month pilot, minimum 6-month pilot starting in May or June. In terms of traffic control devices and measures, in comparison to the permissive regulatory signage that was used last year, we're looking at using prohibitory regulatory signage that also uses new tabs underneath those regulation signs to draw attention from road users. As I mentioned, we do need to make 2 lane reassignments to prevent motorists from being stuck in lanes whose movement is prohibited. One of them is the dedicated southbound left turn lane on South Park Street, and the other is the dedicated through lane eastbound on Spring Garden. Last year, staff observed that people were getting stuck in these lanes despite not being able to turn down Spring Garden Road. And the lane reassignments will be done through temporary barriers, either cones or barrels, but they'll stay in place 24/7. They won't need to be moved at the beginning or end of the day to help with that operational cost. We're also proposing the use of transit priority pavement markings on the surface, bus bike only, red paint on the surface, again, to add and draw attention from road users. And finally, using variable message board signs at kind of the bookend intersections of Queen Street and South Park Street, just again to provide additional information to road users. And then finally, looking at education and enforcement, subject to availability, we're proposing 2 weeks of dedicated police presence by HRP following ongoing enforcement as part of regular patrols. The approach also includes a dedicated on-site Halifax Transit Mobile Supervisor who will be kind of the eyes on the ground, helping staff to respond to any operational needs of the pilot and can also help us track things like compliance, which again builds into that reporting of the project. Other key pieces of the implementation approach include a robust communication strategy, and then monitoring and evaluation various metrics throughout the duration of the pilot. As you can see on the screen here, this is kind of just a plan view of what's being proposed, the prohibitory signage with those new tabs underneath. You can see the lane drops at South Park Street and on Spring Garden Road, as well as the pavement markings. And again, looking at those variable message board signs on either end of the project area, potentially within those lane drops, and further on closer to Brunswick Street on South Park or on Spring Garden Road to provide that extra information to road users. Just as a final kind of discussion, the updated implementation approach described in the report represents what staff consider to be the most appropriate way to deliver the pilot, really balancing functionality and cost, which is fundamental to a pilot project. We've augmented the July 22 approach through various means, prohibitory signage, pavement markings, lane reassignments, and signage and banners. Other more rigorous approaches, like I mentioned, gates and signal head adjustments just aren't feasible for the pilot project. The approach does include 2 weeks of dedicated police enforcement subject to their availability, but like 2022, we do expect this to be a challenge. But we are planning for that mobile supervisor to be that eyes on the ground. Staff do expect compliance to be poor at the start of the pilot as road users adjust to the new regulations and travel patterns change. But we do expect that to improve over time as, again, people adapt and change their routes and adjust to the regulations. And then, yeah, like I said, the communications and evaluation monitoring will be an important aspect of the project. And finally, there are risks associated with the project, especially down to the nature of the regulations and their impact on the transportation network. So looking at the traffic control configuration and time of day nature of the regulations are a change, and they will be different. And this will require people to change their behavior, and it could impact public perception when compliance will be poor. Improvement in driver compliance to mitigate operational concerns may not be also realized in a reasonable period of time, which may require consideration of another pause or cancellation. And finally, increased traffic congestion impacting transit travel times or disruptions to nearby street may also occur throughout the project. And that's the presentation I've got for you today.
Thank you so much for that, Jason, and it's great seeing you in this chamber rather than downstairs at the Point Pleasant, or at the Halifax Peninsula Planning Advisory Committee. I just took a minute for me to remember that far back. That's pre-COVID and the before times. Great to see you here as staff. All right, so first we have on the list Councillor Outthit. If you'd care to put the motion on the floor, please.
I'll put it on for discussion. I move that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council approve the implementation approach developed as described in the staff report dated March 28th, 2023 for a transit priority corridor pilot project along Spring Garden Road between South Park Street and Queen Street. So moved. All right, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Well, first of all, this started off and it wasn't going well, and we stopped it, and that was good. I mean, I've heard you say this so many times, Mr. Chair, over the years. We are going to have to try things. Occasionally, they're not going to work. And if they don't work, we have to stop them. There's no harm in that. There's no shame. And we take another look at it and we bring it back and see if we can make it better. So kudos to those who you know, though we probably took a little abuse in the media or social media or whatever, stood up and said, this isn't working, we need to retrench. So kudos to those who did that. And obviously, this is a good segue, a good test, if you will, for BRT, as you explained in your presentation. I also like the idea. It's funny, the more I guess because I've traveled in Europe a bit and down the States a bit, I often thought that this is the kind of thing we need to do more of in the evenings for different purposes, not for BRT, but of course to have that vibrancy, if you would, on the street at night, like we see on Argyle and these sort of things. But anyway, this is a BRT test, if you will. The problem that I have is the assumptions around policing. And the two folks here from police have heard me do my tirades and my rants many times when they were in West Division on how we don't have enough people on patrol now, and we don't have enough people on patrol to do the special checks and the things we'd like to do, and if it wasn't for the CROs, the school officers, the traffic division, etc., we'd be in a big mess. And I still had that dig, although things, I have to admit, things are getting a little better in West with some hirings. I would like to see more technology used. I'd like to see special constables used. You're mentioning the supervisors from transit, and I think they can issue parking tickets. I don't know what other parking tickets they can issue, or the SOTs they can issue. But I am really worried at a time when the calls are increasing, the numbers really aren't increasing of police. There are many off. We saw an incident in my district last week where, you know, at least 8 or 10 cars were there, and they were pulled in from RCMP and HRP. We've got officers spending longer transporting and being at emergency rooms than we would like to see, all focusing on the discussion we had yesterday around policing and public safety doing more and detasking and retasking and whatnot. I have real concerns, not only, maybe not so much for the pilot, but ongoing, to think that police are going to be available to be hired to stand there. The patrol will have much time to dedicate to this. I think that's a big whopping assumption that I'd like to see some other thinking go into, some additional thinking go into. And I don't know if Greg or somebody wants to speak to that, but or Patricia, if you do, but I am really concerned about the assumption that patrol or additional officers will be available to do what I think either special constables or technology should be doing on that street. That's my concern.
Go ahead, staff.
Sure, I guess I'll start, and if anyone else wants to jump in, they can. But so Patricia Hughes, Director of Planning and Customer Engagement at Halifax Transit. It would be our expectation that over time, over the longer term, it would be minimal effort. The way that we have bus lanes now in a variety of places where the default is the only compliance in the existing bus lanes is through HRP, but the compliance is such that that's not, I don't believe that's a huge pressure. So the longer term, it would operate much like our existing bus lanes, where the only option for compliance would be HRP, but it's not something that is required, I guess, regularly.
So, thank you. So I guess there's two other questions. One is I wouldn't mind somebody coming up to talk about whether they think they have the resources or not. But secondly, could we not use special constables somehow, be they transit or others? Did thought go into that? Or?
We have relief coming up right behind you there, Patricia.
They have both heard my West Division rants before, so.
If you could introduce yourself for the record.
Sure. Chair, I'm Superintendent Greg Mason, the Halifax Regional Police.
Good to see you.
And through you, Chair, to the councillor, we share your concerns. We have, through extra duty, we would be able to, and we also understand that in a progressive city, we have to look at different options, and we also understand the draw of and the benefits to transit. But we also have to look at the effects or the impacts on our extra duty people, and we are in a position now where we're doing a lot of extra duty. This would become a priority for us, but I can't guarantee that the people would be available. So much as the presentation said, it would be on a voluntary basis. We would do every effort to fill those roles, but we cannot guarantee that they would be filled, especially over the length of the pilot. Over those 2 weeks, we could make a concerted effort, but I would not make a guarantee to you that we could.
And as far as patrol being able to do much about this, and I'll stop, but I don't think that's reasonable at all, is it?
No, we can't tell you where the patrol officer is going to be, or the officers, or the CROs, or the traffic members are going to be, based on our priority response model. We don't know where they're going to be at any certain time. They may be called away, so that would not be feasible in our minds.
All right, thank you. And then, just before I go then, Chair, Patricia, special constables, traffic, transit police with additional empowerment, or is there a plan B somehow here?
We didn't explore that for the sake of the pilot, which is shorter term with a quick turnaround. The current ability of the mobile supervisors is parking tickets, essentially, at bus stops or in bus lanes. That's the only ability we have currently.
All right, well, we'll see what others have to say, but I love the vision, but I'm very worried about the implementation, so, thank you.
I wonder if Mr. Anglish or, Brad, could you comment? My understanding is that special constables have limited powers.
Yeah, we can't do moving violations. That's the domain of police. Just one thing we did learn from last year is that we went in with the goal that 100% compliance was a measure of the outcome. And in fact, that's not true in any bus lane in the city at all. And we also learned that trying to educate, prevent people from breaking the law in that tight zone wasn't necessarily a good plan either, because of course we're disrupting the flow. And so to some degree, once a person makes a mistake or purposely enters that zone, you want them to move through the zone. And so we're being very transparent here about this risk, and that success is not necessarily that lane is empty. There is going to be people in it, and as staff has clearly said, we expect it to diminish over time. What we're on fire for and why we had to shut down the pilot last year is because it became unsafe, and that will be the measure we use again. If we see violations or behavior in those zones that is absolutely unsafe, where pedestrians or motorists or anyone is at risk, that's when we'll have to do, as we did last year. It was a call on a Friday evening to me to shut it down. And so we just want to be transparent on this, because, you know, people will see violations and think that's a failure. That's not necessarily true. And so that's what I have to offer. Thank you. All right. I think I share everybody. We wish we could have more, right? And so do the police, but we don't. But as staff's recommending, we don't think that is a go, no-go on this one. We think we've got enough done that we can give it a try again, and recommend to council that if we see unsafe activity and anyone at risk, then we'll shut down the pilot again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Outthit. We'll move to Councillor Cleary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And actually, just to follow up on what Mr. Anguish said, in terms of compliance, I remember when we were in Paris in November, a number of places you'd go, because there's just not enough room. You'd walk by big buildings on very wide streets, and there'd be like 6 work trucks parked on the sidewalk because they couldn't park on the street doing work, and pedestrians and people just walk around them. When we were in Brooklyn a couple of years ago, I remember we were on a one-way street where the conference was. And there was a side street just over there, but the one-way was going this way, and you'd have all these people leaving the apartment, and they went wrong way down the one-way because that was the quickest way to the first intersection. It happens, I get it. But that should be part of the communications plan too, that, you know, as we're going to do the best we can during the pilot, there may be some non-compliance, and we will deal with that in the most appropriate way. Okay, so on to some of the questions I had, and I love the idea, and I remember it was Councillor Mason a number of years ago, maybe 6 years ago now, we talked about a lot of pilots and just trying stuff. And in systems design and system change, you always talk about failing fast. You move a bunch of things around. If something is working, you stop it, you try something else. And I'm glad that we actually, I mean, you learn more from failure than you do from successes. Let's just not have too many failures. That's right. But I guess in my mind, a pilot needs to be as close as possible to what the situation will be if we implement it permanently. And it's obviously going to be very resource intensive to make that permanent and to add all the humans that will need to be there in order to simulate that kind of environment in the pilot. So if we did make this permanent, would you be looking at gates? Would you be looking at those retractable road barriers? Would you be looking at those kind of things? Because you clearly, if we implement this permanently, can't have 8 people on site all the time. That would just be a huge waste of resources for the city. So in the permanent, if we agree with the pilot was successful, we're going to do this permanently, would we go with some sort of barriers, physical barriers in the street?
No, so like Patricia said, the intention is with this implementation.
No, not with the pilot. If we did it permanently.
If we did it permanently, yes. So we're hoping to see that compliance will improve with the implementation through the pilot. But the assumption is that we will get to a point where through the pilot, we won't need those physical implementations.
Yeah, but it's wrong, so I'll tell you why. We put a turn restriction on Oxford and Oak Allen, and you're not allowed to go straight through if you're in a motorized vehicle. I stand there regularly because it's only a few blocks from my house. 30% of the cars I observe go straight through. 30% guaranteed any single time you're there. Sometimes it's higher. And we had a couple police officers there regularly for the implementation, constantly educating the drivers going by, and they failed miserably in their education. And I don't want to say we wanted to re-educate them because that sounds almost communist, but people do not comply if there's no authority nearby telling them they're not allowed to. That just doesn't happen. So if we're going to do some physical barriers in a permanent installation, I think we have to replicate that in the pilot. So you mentioned cones, I think, at the beginning. You know, having those big barrels, sticking, or barricades, although barricades are harder to move quickly, but having those barrels, and if you've got transit supervisors or staff on site, they can, as a bus is coming, just physically move the barrel, bus can go by, put the barrel back. But if you don't have some sort of simulated barrier, people are not. And so, you know, it won't be, 5 or 10% non-compliance. It'll be 30, 40, 50, 100%. Because once people see it, they're just going to replicate it. Well, if Buddy got away with it, I'll get away with it. I'm going to do it. And that was kind of, I think, one of the failures we had last time. In terms of the communications, all the communicating you can do beforehand is not going to be worth that much. People don't listen to the radio anymore. People don't watch local TV anymore. The algorithm has changed on most social media. It's really hard to get those targeted, if you do Facebook ads or whatever. On-site communications is going to be the best. So you mentioned the variable message boards, that'll be important. But physically having something there that can be moved easily, but provide some sort of message or barrier or something, I think is the only way we're going to be able to go. Otherwise, Brad's going to be getting another call on the weekend saying, it's not working the second time, we need to stop it again. And I don't want to see that. I really do want to see this successful, because I think it's going to be great, and I think we could do a permanent installation, it'll be fabulous. But if we do a pilot and it's just as bad or almost as bad as the first time, then not only do we look foolish again, but we don't get the data we need to say whether it worked or not.
Sure, just in response to that, I think that, we don't know what the permanent solution would look like until we do the pilot, but what we've discussed as staff is that that permanent solution is less likely to be a physical barrier, like a gate, and a possible future solution could look like changes to the traffic signals, right? So that's more likely than a physical barrier. So in terms of trying to replicate that in the pilot, that would be challenging to the point of impossible. So it would be more likely the ideal permanent solution, nothing else considered, would be changes to the traffic signals.
Yeah, and I get that, I know my time is up, but you won't have compliance, you really won't.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. We'll move to Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll just pick up where Councillor Cleary was leaving off, because that was one of my concerns as well. And to his point about system change, you have to make sure that when you fail, that you can adapt and make improvements. And so I guess my question would be, do you feel that there are enough improvements for us to achieve a better success rate than last time? Because otherwise I feel that, doing it again and not succeeding it's not an appropriate use of resources, right, to continue to do something that's not going to work. My other questions have to do with the traffic speed and volumes on side streets. So I see that you've recognized that as an issue in the report. I'm not quite clear at this point how that's going to be assessed and measured. I just think it's important that we do collect the data. So, I know this is a concern of some of the local residents, and it'd be very good that, we come back with some solid information to be able to measure that impact and have a meaningful discussion about it. So if you could just talk to how that will be evaluated and measured, that'd be great. And the other piece, actually, this goes back to the point around the enforcement. It's amazing that, we can have no enforcement, and that's not a problem, but if we have enforcement, it has to be HRP. So, I think we need to think out of the box, and maybe it's barrels, maybe it's like, we hire crossing guards, like, can we find an avenue through crossing guards to have people on the street looking at, directing traffic or holding no-go signs? I think that we just really need to put all the options on the table and really think out of the box here. So if we have crossing guards who can step out in traffic and hold a sign that says stop and don't go, is that a possibility? It'd be a lot less expensive than having HRP officers there who we might or might not have, depending on their availability. That's just it's just too much of a variable to count on. And I think when we're going forward, looking at transportation priority corridors, we need to get this figured out. We need to solve this. We can't keep moving forward with our other plans if we don't have a solution in place for enforcement. And, I don't know what it's going to take to make that change happen, but I would look at all of the tools in our toolbox and see what we can do. The physical barriers, you're going to have people who move those physical barriers and whatnot, but, maybe there's some other way of looking at this. All right, thank you.
So I think I'd like to throw that to Superintendent Mason, if you can comment on whether or not, like, who can actually control access to traffic and direct traffic if you're able.
Just Chair, the only people within, that can control traffic are police officers. Although we see private companies that are, that do signage and are on-site safety, they are not approved or authorized to direct traffic. That we run into the similar issue when we plan for special events. I'll use the Blue Nose for an example. We have to use, in areas of intersections, we have to use police officers for that.
Yeah, this is in line with, that was one of my very first motions when I got elected, was to try and fix the Pride, Blue Nose, and Parade of Lights problems.
What about crossing guards?
Well, that, they can't, I mean, I'll let the superintendent speak, but I think it's a traffic control issue rather than just being in the crosswalk.
Yes, exactly, to the Chair's point. That is it. It's not, it's the directing and control of the traffic that's the issue. The crossing guard, again, is there as a reminder and a deterrent and a safety piece for the children or the pedestrians, but they're not directing the flow of traffic.
And for the folks following along at home, that's a motor vehicle issue, not an internal policy issue to HRM, which is frustrating as heck when we've asked to be changed and has not been changed. Next on the list, we have Councillor Purdy. Councillor Purdy. Oh, sorry, you had 4 seconds left. Yep.
With regards to enough improvements, yes, we do feel that there have been improvements with regards to just in terms of the traffic control devices, removing potential confusion on those safety issues from last year with the pavement markings, the lane drops that weren't implemented last year, the prohibitory signage, as well as having that on the ground, eyes on the ground personnel telling us if there are issues, how do we respond, and where might those extra barrels need to be placed. And with regards to traffic volumes on side streets and how that's collected, I don't know the exact mechanisms of how it's done, but it's a matter of laying or placing devices within the right of way on the street, and it collects that data. And the intention is to collect those pre and post implementation to understand those changes in the volumes and speeds on those side streets.
Okay, great. So there will be traffic measures put in place around the neighborhood. Okay, I don't think that was in the report, but thank you for clarifying.
Okay, so we'll go to Councillor Purdy and perhaps restart our time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this presentation. And I don't know, I'm just always the only one that doesn't seem to catch the vision. I just was thinking, why are we doing this? I mean, I see the pedestrian-oriented street and transit only. It just seems like a lot of hoops to jump through to do that. I'm happy it's only a pilot, so I can support it, because I was very, like was said earlier, happy to see that we were able to stop it within 5 days last year because it just wasn't working. So that's great. So I have confidence that if it just doesn't work again for whatever reason, that I'm sure that, you know, the right decisions will be made. The concerns I have are, again, tying up HRP resources in something that is, like, in my mind, just not necessary. Tying up resources of even compliance officers or even that the supervisor, like if we're going to use pylons or other type of like temporary barriers, someone's going to have to be there to set them up, be there throughout the day to make sure that, you know, they haven't been pushed over, and then to remove them at the end of the day. Like the logistics just seem very complicated and resource heavy. I was wondering about the Spring Garden Business Improvement District. It doesn't seem like any new correspondence has happened. What do they think about it? And also the measures of success for this pilot project. It sounds like the measures of success is only compliance. Like if car traffic is going to stop going down Spring Garden Road, what about the impact to business? Like, is that going to be taken into consideration as a measure of success, whether this pilot project becomes permanent? What about the impact to traffic on surrounding streets? And what if it's just a nightmare for folks in the area? Will that be a measure of success or failure for the project? What if the traffic impact is a very negative component? Would that be a consideration for stopping the pilot project early? What about impact to businesses? If they're seeing a decline in their profits, would that be a consideration for stopping the pilot project prior to the 1 year? And in the presentation, sorry, I know, it's like, wow. The BRT, the Transit Priority Corridor, is this pilot on Spring Garden Road, could this be replicated to other major corridors down the road, like removing vehicles off other major streets in HRM to have pedestrian and transit only? Is this like one of many, the first of many? I was just wondering what the future plan is.
Who wants to pick up the grenade? Tricia, go ahead.
I'll take the last question and then hand off the rest of them. The BRT corridor, there is images in the rapid transit strategy that show kind of what our expectations are on each of the corridors, but there's a lot of work left to do on that to determine, where are areas where we have to add some space for bus priority, where are places where we would take away car capacity. There's no other section of road right now where we're considering removing cars completely, but there certainly would be areas where we would be reducing capacity, and we might, be looking at different kinds of regulations, different kind of signs. How would that work? So I think the lessons are very transferable, but there's not currently any other corridors where we're looking to do exactly this. I'll pass it off.
In terms of other measures of success, so we're looking at a whole host of potential measures, transit-related, including travel times and variability, how transit operators and passengers feel about the pilot itself, as well as public experience on the street. How do people on the street, that qualitative aspect of the pilot, how are they feeling? What do they think? How has the area been improved? But then looking at that traffic side, like we mentioned, the vehicle volumes on side streets, speeds, as well as collision data, how these changes to the transportation network actually change any potential safety factors. And then finally looking at impacts on local businesses. So we are hoping to collaborate with those local businesses to get a better understanding of how might the pilot impact. Now there is an element of not being able to make correlative relationships between these changes, but taken together, I think we can get a pretty good picture of how the pilot impacts the street and the area.
Can I ask a clarification on that one?
20 seconds, Councillor Brady.
Oh, great. If there is a noted negative impact, is that a possibility to stop the pilot early and then reassess?
I think it would be a matter of understanding what negative is happening and how, what we could potentially change to reverse that negative. If it's a matter of adjusting the traffic control setup, then it may just be a matter of that. But again, it comes back to the data collection and the evaluation and monitoring, and what are we seeing, and what might we actually need to do to address the negatives.
Okay.
Do you have something to add, Ms. Copelands?
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Transportation Standing Committee. Hanita Koblenz, Transportation Planning. Just popping up to just speak to that question about the views of the Business Association. I don't want to put words in their mouth. Their representative is here, and I'm sure we'll speak to this at the end of the meeting when there's public participation. But when this was originally proposed, they did canvass their members. They were 50-50. The understanding is that, those in favor weren't necessarily directly fronting the spine. They were in the district. I think there are concerns from the Business Association, and I'm sure they'll speak to them more directly. In terms of changes that we've made for this pilot, one of the things we did here with the original timing of the proposed transit-only pilot, the 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. times, that didn't leave much time for example, waste collection on the street within the confines of our noise bylaw. That was one of the reasons why the 8 to 8 change did take place. So there was a nod to some of those concerns to create a bit more time for servicing of the street. And I might just leave it at that, and I'm sure you'll hear from the representative shortly.
Thank you.
Very good. So next we have Councillor Lovelace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, great discussion. Thanks for this report. I have this kind of groundhog feeling, which doesn't give me a whole lot of confidence. Not that I don't think this is a great idea. I'm concerned. I'm concerned. So when I look at the performative measures, right, and how we're actually going to evaluate this, where this data is going to come from, how it's going to be collected quantitatively, qualitatively, I am concerned. Because over time, I think whenever we have any kind of behavior change, we're not going to be able to capture the full scope, right, of the issue. You're going to have the folks who are on street at the time that are going to be able to answer the question, say, oh, I think it's great, or I don't think it's great, having had maybe 3 or 5 minutes, to have this experience, whether they're walking, whether on the bus, or what have you. So what I'm saying is you're not going to have a fuller qualitative analysis of this unless I think you go a little bit deeper. And so, when I look at the points that this is not a touch screen. When I look at the points of, data collections like Halifax Transit data, travel time, passenger counts, and so on and so forth, I'm not sure what passenger counts are going to tell you, other than bus is full or, the bus is half full. I don't know how those numbers are actually going to impact from a qualitative perspective, whether or not this pilot's working. The other thing I'm not quite sure about is the realm of the collisions that are being counted. So when you're looking at intersection, I get that. You're going to look at intersection collisions, you're going to look at pedestrian issues, you're going to look at situations with vehicles entering, into the space where they shouldn't be entering. Again, behavior change, they're not going to know, should I be here, shouldn't I be here? And as soon as they find out they're not going to be here, then the heightened awareness of like fear and anxiety kicks in, right? So again, I don't know what it is that you're counting when you say you're going to look at collisions. I don't know the geographic scope of the collisions. I'm not sure of that data. The other thing is, what data from police are you capturing? So when we can get police there on site, when they are available, they may only be available there for 10 minutes and then they get pulled off to another thing. I'm not sure how valuable that data is going to be to the overall collection, of that data. So I have a lot of concerns about this. And I think that the Business Association should be concerned because they've been down this road before. And I would think that they kind of feel like a guinea pig at this point. So, I am hesitant to jump forward into something that I don't fully have confidence in. And I think that we need to be careful that when we do this a second time, that we do it right. And I'm just looking at my time. And the other thing I guess I'm just concerned about is from a compliance perspective, we know that people turn right on a red. We know that people blast through red. We know that people drive in the transit lane. Anytime I'm on Bears Road, boom, they're in the transit lane so they can get to the mall faster, right? Compliance is an issue, and that's behavior related. No matter how much education we do, I don't think that we can rely on compliance at all. And I think that's what Brad was saying. So what I'm wondering is, what's the number? Right? What is the metric that you're looking for to be able to say, hey, this is successful or this is not successful? And I think Councillor Purdy was trying to get at that too. Like, how do we know that this is successful, or when do you know when you need to pull the plug and this is not working? I would much rather see more technology being used to guide this behavior change, because we know signage doesn't work, right? People are speeding through, going 90 in a 60 zone, regularly stunting on our highways. So Yeah, I have real concerns with this, and the last thing I want is for anyone to be injured or, any kind of risk that could have been mitigated. Thank you.
With regards to where data collection is going to occur, so we're looking at the immediate project area, so Spring Garden Road and the intersecting streets, but also the broader area looking at Sackville Street, Morris Street, Clyde Street, with respect to those vehicle volumes and speed counts, to get not just the project area impact, but also how it impacts the broader
community.
area. Yeah. The next question, how do we, or what do the passenger count and what types of transit data can we collect? So we have a whole host of transit data available to us, boardings, alightings at specific transit stops and how that changes over time, transit travel speed, and a whole host of other variables.
You don't know where they're coming from, though, do you, when they're on that bus? No. So you are limited with the data that you have?
Yes.
Yeah.
With respect to your question, where are you counting collisions, kind of referring back to your other question, we'll be looking at the broad area, not just along the project area, and that'll be in collaboration with Halifax Regional Police and how we can acquire that data and over time and how we can present that.
So is that an agreement with HRP that you would have to be able to access that data, or how I guess, is it just the data that they're posting on the website that's accessible to everybody? Yeah, okay, I see the yes. Okay, thank you.
Presenter 4, please. There you go.
Okay, perfect.
Red means go. Do you have any more answers there, Jason, or are you done? Oh. Sorry, so we're not at public presentation at this point. No, I was just getting his mic back on. Go ahead, Jason. You're live. Do you have anything else to say?
I think your last question was, what's that number or metric that we're looking for?
The magic metric.
Unfortunately, we don't have that number right now, and it'll be a matter of evaluating how things and observing how things unfold over time. That magic compliance number, we don't have it, and we won't really know until the pilot begins. And like we said, the assumption is that it will reduce over time, but we can't set that magic number right now.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go to Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. This has been interesting. This would be the second time we're trying it. The comment that safety is the bar in this one, I hope that it is more than that. Other places have tried this, have probably come across the same stumbles, have probably faced the same restrictions, and have been successful. And other places have tried it, probably, and have not been successful. What have they done? This is not one of the challenges that I continually see and face is that we are doing a thing and we are not the first people to do it. And yet the report indicates, well, everything in HRM, as opposed to let's look at London, Amsterdam, somewhere else to see how they have tackled exactly this problem. So I'm simply not a fan of reinventing the wheel again. So what have other jurisdictions done? What analysis, what traffic control measures? I don't think barrels will work. I don't think having people on site 24/7 to move barrels back and forth or barricades or whatever will work. If there is something that would have to be in place, it would have to be a physical measure. I absolutely support that. Even police 100% of the time, when they're available, will not be effective. So if we're going to have something in place, it would have to be more automated. You know, that is basically what I'm wondering. What has worked in other places and something other than barrels here?
To answer your question, there are jurisdictions that have implemented transit priority and transit only across the globe. And it is really context specific in terms of hours of operations, is it 24/7 or not? The time period, and then the vehicles permitted on the street. It again comes down to very context specific considerations: bicycles, taxis, deliveries, garbage trucks, loading, and the different traffic control devices they use, whether it's signage, pavement markings, gates, or turn restrictions or bollards. It's all very different. In our jurisdictional scan, we did find that very few, if any, use the bollards or the gate. Banff was the single case study that we found that used the gates. And then it comes down to how enforcement is used, or what tools for enforcement. Some relied heavily on police, others had camera enforcement, but also tying into traffic signals and phasing. So again, it comes down to very context specific and the level of implementation that is made in those specific jurisdictions.
Okay, so this is a situation where the wheel has to be reinvented every time.
The implementation needs to be specific to the context that's being applied to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Anguish.
Yeah, I'll just chime in because I saw the way you worked with my words there. So safety is not the only, safety is a quick shutdown, as Councillor Cleary said. That's a fast failure. There is a cascading set of measures and feedback, qualitative and quantitative, that can also shut this pilot down early. Enough negative feedback and, you're going to tip this. But I think that the key piece that you're asking is, other people around the world have done this. Absolutely, permanently. Our challenge is we're being asked to do a pilot. So we're limiting the tools that we can invest in. We're being very clear. It would cost a significant amount of money to get the proper signal heads in and a lot of time. And so if that is the measure here, like, we have direction to do a pilot. If we want to go ahead and just say, no, we're going to make this permanent without ever doing a pilot, now all those things that we've looked at around the world, the barricades, the signals and everything come into play. What we can't do is that for a pilot, it wouldn't financially make sense. So I just want to make sure that piece is captured here. We certainly have looked at it. We know this is suboptimal to what a permanent solution would look like. But again, we're back to, it's a pilot. And so we're trying to get as much intel as we can without putting anybody at risk, and being financially responsible. That's our challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Councillor. Everybody's already spoken once, so I'm going to speak from the chair if that's all right. I do support this as the area councillor, and the fundamentals haven't really changed since we had these discussions a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. What we're talking about is implementation and how we're going to change it based on the experience of the first pilot. And Brad kind of stole a bit of my thunder there, which is, do we want to do a pilot? Or do we want to go straight to a permanent solution? I think it would be a lot clearer if, when people were driving westbound on Spring Garden, they got to Queen, they got a transit white light, or they got turn signals that deconflicted with the pedestrians, and there would be no ambiguity at that point, except for people who relied on the provincial driving handbook for their information about how signals work, because none of those signals we put up are in there yet. It's from 2005. But, I'd be open to having that discussion, but given the issues we're having with supply chain and labor, that would push this out. This would be next summer. Right? Like, there's just no way, right? So are we willing to accept an imperfect pilot so that something happens this year, so we can get some data, so we can see how it works? And also, frankly, that was my other big note on here, is a lot of the measures we're going to put in place, because in the integrated mobility plan and the regional plan and the bus rapid transit plan and the moving forward together plan and the active transportation functional plan, we've said we're going to take away roadway, partially or fully, from cars for other things. We've said that all throughout the region. That's something we've said, that the single occupant vehicle is not our priority, though it's important, it's not our priority. And so, in some places like Vernon and Jubilee, are we going to put in physical barricades to stop cars from going straight through? No, right? What we might do is occasionally ask Superintendent Mason, once we actually have the ability to have someone with a handheld photo radar just sit there and, ticket people as they go through, and we'll mail them tickets later, right? Those units cost $25,000. We don't have the ability legally to do a lot of the enforcement measures that we will be able to do someday that'll help with a lot of this transit stuff. When you get into the heart of downtown, just like how painted bike lanes don't work on a Hollis Street, you need to have harder, more serious permanent implementations. And I think that, I'd love to see bollards or lights or bollards and lights at this site, but the other big piece I will say is the area councilors. We've been talking about a pilot to the businesses and residents who live there. So for us to flip to that right now would require another round of consultation because we haven't done that yet. I feel like that would be, because we'd basically be saying we're done, it's happening. And a lot of the support we have might be soft support, and it's support from people who are saying, yeah, let's see what happens. And if we spend a couple of $100,000, it's going to be pretty hard to back down from that. I don't think that's where council wants to go. But I do support this, and I know that it's not going to be 100% in terms of compliance, and I'm okay with that. My one comment to staff, it's not really a question, is I like everything I saw in the report. I wonder whether or not a variable message sign was considered for in front of the library so that people heading westbound on Queen Street also get a sign. It wouldn't be right in their way. You can't. It's not wide enough. There's no left-hand turn lane there big enough or whatever on the receiving side. But I worry about that approach, and that seemed to be where we had the most problems in the pilot that was shut down after 5 days, was people coming out of downtown continuing straight. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about, was that explored? Thank you.
Just for clarification, you're looking at westbound Spring Garden Road heading towards Queen?
Yeah, Queen, yeah, where Spring Garden crosses Queen in front of the library.
So the intention and what we've proposed is looking at variable message board signs in front of the Doyle building near-ish to Brunswick Street. So those drivers coming from downtown up Spring Garden towards Queen.
Perfect. I withdraw the question. I didn't see it, and I definitely saw them at the other side. Thought that was great. Didn't see them at the east end. Perfect. All right, we'll go to second go-round. Next is Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just people talked about, what does success look like? When you look at the original report and this one, in my mind, more people arriving by bus is a metric of success. Having walkers and rollers feeling and being safer on the street is a success. More customers for local businesses is a success. A lot of drivers, the vehicles, are not customers. They're just driving through the area to get to work or home from work. Having just a more comfortable street for sitting on the new benches we put on Spring Garden Road, for eating if you just come out of a cafe. And we can do that through surveys, through destination intercept studies. There's a couple of different ways to get that data. I'm still concerned about the enforcement. And I know and the report talks about police being there as often as they can. I'm pretty sure, although I'm pretty sure Inspector Mason's not going to say this, but they will not be there that often, because there will be, if you look at the calls and the emails that we get regularly, there will be break and enters, there will be drivers that they have to go deal with, there will be collisions that they have to attend to. And already, given the decrease in the number of CROs and school officers and the spreading out of constables because of, so many people off, they're just not going to be there. And having them, there for a couple hours every day for 2 weeks is just not going to be it. And a transit supervisor too is not going to be it. So here's a question for you. Under the Motor Vehicle Act and under the Public Highways Act, Section 4 Public Highways and Section 88 of the Motor Vehicle Act, we declare a work zone when work is happening. And when you do that, we can assign traffic control persons to direct and regulate traffic to protect workers, motorists, and pedestrians. So in work zones, which is why police officers don't have to be at work zones, why you can have flaggers there, Could we, have you investigated this? Could we declare this a work zone? Jesus, like, get a jackhammer and do some work if you need to. Or by motion of council, could we close Spring Garden Road and then have a traffic control company? I mean, you think about the intersections that you'd have to deal with. Maybe 1 or 2 flaggers per intersection. We've got, I'm scrolling in the wrong report. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 most, but certainly, I mean, it's easier to close off the South Park and the Queen Street side. The rest of them, you might have people on site. Is that something we can explore? Because I desperately want this to go forward. I desperately want this to be successful. But if we can close the road either by construction or by motion of council, then maybe there is an alternative person who could regulate traffic. Because if you read the Public Highways Act and you read the Motor Vehicle Act, that is an option for us. I just don't know if it qualifies. Maybe we really have to massage it. If we can get the provincial traffic authority of the minister to kind of tilt his head, squint, and look at it sideways, maybe they'll go, sure, go ahead.
Who wants to take that one? Patricia?
I'll take part of it, and I'm hoping the solicitor will jump in on the second half, actually. No. So we definitely did look at the idea of flaggers and considering a work zone and talked about that quite a bit and tried to find a way to make that work, and we don't think it's an option. So that is something that we did look at extensively.
How extensive? Like how do we go to the minister? We go to the Mike? Is this still Michael, the provincial traffic authority? Do we ask like, hey, can you do us a solid here?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel all eyes gazing. Yeah. I need a lawyer, because this would be a career-ending move. Look, we'll have to haul it away. I totally understand where you're coming from. Yeah, it's a long shot, and I certainly, do I think we'd get permission? No. That I'm sure of. However, I will consult with Colin and John, and maybe respond to the committee outside of chambers. I just don't have an answer for you right now. I like the way your mind works, but yeah, I have to give that some pretty serious thought.
I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but I feel like we did all exactly the same work trying to find a way to make it so the biggest expense for Parade of Lights was not paying for the police to close the street, and we did all that conversation all the way up into the province, and they were like, nope, it's for construction only. And so we can revisit that, and I would encourage staff, I mean, Brad's committed to take that away, but I suspect we will get a very similar answer, and that's like, I worked that for 5 years trying to make that happen, so I wish we could get a different answer, but I suspect the answer is no until we get the Traffic Safety Act or Act of God or something. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Cleary. We'll move to Councillor Outden.
Thank you, Chair. And every once in a while, it's really nice to have Sean around, isn't it? Yeah, I like that. I like that. But as Sean just said, please understand that I think we really want to try something and we really want it to work. And I don't have a problem with it. We had to restart it, but you have to understand once bitten, twice shy a little too. And so this is, and I think Paul and Sean have both mentioned the fact that the technology is, I'd be more comfortable with. Yes, there'd be a cost to that. It's almost, I'm just afraid we're trying to pilot again with knowing that it's not really a fair pilot in the sense because you don't have that money, Brad, to do the things that you'd like to do to make it better. So if your pilot is imperfect, your results are going to be imperfect, right? And nothing's perfect, but you know what I mean. Maybe the traffic signals, surely that wouldn't be as expensive as having motorized barricades and things. There must be something that you've looked at, so maybe you can clarify that. But listen, I want to make a suggestion, Mr. Chair, and I think you and legal hopefully will agree with this. I'd like to defer decision on this till we, a little later today, until we have the public hearing, because I would like to hear from the business folks.
Well, so what I would suggest then would be so we could defer it, but then we have to defer it until the very end of the meeting. So
Okay.
let's move that up. Anyone who wants to speak to this.
Move it up
that
now?
will- Yeah.
Shall we just suspend this for now?
Yeah, I'll take a motion
I would love to do
move,
that.
public participation related to item 12.1.3 immediately, and then we'll open the floor, and we'll hear from anybody who's here, and then we'll resume debate. So that's moved by Councillor Out, that's seconded by Councillor Lovelace. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Good idea. Seeing none, I know he also is right a couple of times a day. It's amazing, magic. Good job. So we've all, so no further discussion, all those in favor? Opposed? Carries. All right, so with that, I'll ask staff to vacate, and I suspect we already know at least one person who wishes to speak today. Is there, and Katie's going to go grab the list, so we'll just wait 2 seconds for that, and then we'll resume. There's nobody on the list, Katie says, so I would invite anyone in the audience, and this time it's for real, Sue. I'm not going to make you sit back down again. You please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Sue Utek, and I'm the Executive Director for the Spring Garden Area Business Association. Thank you, Councillor Out. I'd actually had come today to ask for a deferral because we did not receive this report till Tuesday afternoon. So most of the merchants weren't even aware. I was not made aware until Monday afternoon by a staff member. And when I went on the website, the report was not available Monday, was not available Tuesday morning. Contacted our councillor, no response, so here we are today. But having said that, today I'm here to ask you to defeat the staff recommendation and for a number of reasons directly from your own report. One, you have no costing of this proposed pilot or the future permanent installation of this program. The pilot, as it's suggested right now, today, has taken you right back to last year. The same problems will exist. None of those problems were addressed in the report. You have no idea of the overall implication of saving 26 seconds, according to your report, on Spring Garden versus the delays on Queen Street, as indicated in the staff report. The report has not resolved the issue of cars backing up Artillery Place and residents not being able to get out of their parking garage, nor has it resolved when the pilot project was on, the driver is at Birmingham Street looking one way, the traffic's backed up, run and gun, pedestrians are trying to cross Breton Street. It was a nightmare for us as an association. The multiple risks identified are to be resolved through additional signage. That is quite ironic and rich, folks, as we were denied wayfinding signage, as there was an expense to it, and it would, quote, clutter up the area. Dropping 2 lanes either way at Spring Garden and South Park will result in large backups on the street, thus impeding the 26 seconds you are hoping to save. The multiple risks identified are to be resolved through an unguaranteed police presence at $108 per hour. So you're looking at spending in 2 weeks, 12 hours a day times 4 constables times $108. Is it worth it? The multiple risks are identified through an additional transit supervisor on site. Is this really your priority? So to quote from your report, transportation mode and user group diversity, right-of-way constraints, and Spring Garden Road's various functions as a commercial destination, place of employment, traffic and transit thoroughfare, residential area, and institutional and public space create challenges to successfully operationalize a transit priority corridor pilot project. Please decide what the permanent cost is before you decide to pilot. Save us all on money and energy here. Why is this in the report? Bus-only pavement markings will lead to confusion, surface traction, and durability. Well, if you know it's a problem, why would you put it in the report? Temporary barriers. Their use can be operationally costly and should be used in a strategic manner. I don't even know what that means. How many people are going to be running up and down moving wooden barriers and hobby horse this year? The traffic lane reassignment could result in reduced efficiency at the intersection, which would increase overall delays, thus impacting transit. What are you trying to accomplish here? Yes, having markings that indicate go right and someone go through in the same lane will be a delay. It's notable. Automatic gates, you already have challenges at existing bus terminals. Throw that one out. Traffic signals will result in a structural review of the overall loading capacity to see if this is even feasible. because your report states there may not be a signal configuration that can be implemented without resulting in an overly complicated and confusing signal display that drivers may have difficulty interpreting properly. Photo radar, not legislated. Toss that one out. And finally, signage. The report says prohibitive messaging. That is a great title. No left turn, do not enter, new tabs, flexible bollards, signage across the street, all shut out. Just don't come here. You just spent $11 million. We appreciate it. We help it. Like, leave us alone at this point. And by the way, we're looking at Spring Garden will have to be closed down for another month just to fix the deficiencies that are from the pilot project, the street revitalization itself. The only loading zone on Spring Garden will not be available. And when we talk about loading zone, just a clarification, the new hours proposed are not for convenience. It's because you were in violation of your own bylaw. Garbage trucks could not pick up. I'm hoping to get a little more since I had less notice. The entire evaluation on page 9 is a direct contradiction to the report. You've answered the question, what will happen? Money and mayhem, that's what's going to happen. 760 to 900 bus trips a day proposed is not ambience, folks. In closing, there was a reason this failed after 4 days. None of the issues identified will be resolved. Spring Garden is the heartbeat of Halifax. Reducing it to another experiment is an insult to merchants and residents alike. It was a good try. We thank you. But let's admit defeat and move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. Is there anyone else in the audience who wish to present at this time? Come forward, Bill. If you could identify yourself for the record.
I will. Thank you. My name is Bill Campbell. I'm a director of Walk and Roll Halifax. We sent in a brief email, I think may have gotten distributed. Thanks, Katie. And one of our concerns is that in the report you mentioned pylons and barrels. And our concern is that we want to see the crosswalks and sidewalks in the area clear and of obstructions, especially for people who are blind or partially sighted. And it's clear to me that we're in between a pedestrian generator, Dalhousie University and St. Mary's, and a pedestrian attractor, downtown businesses, food and beverage. And there'll be a lot of traffic in between there. And these could be tackle dummies or worse. And they could be all over the place if they're light movable barrels and things. So our suggestion is that you make them more substantial. And just during the conversation, it came to mind that on Argyle Street at Prince, we have like a half barrier that's open and closable. It's in place. We use them. And it's on the face of it an affordable piece of infrastructure. If this was something similar to this, and this needs some due diligence, of course, if something similar to that was placed on the direction of travel at Queen Street and the direction of travel at South Park, closed at 8 o'clock in the morning, opened at 8 in the evening, plus or minus, buses could approach, do a normal lane change, move around with the courtesy of the oncoming transit vehicle, and continue. The barrier could have some real nasty signage to people who are driving. And it will involve people because someone has to open it, someone has to close it. But I did notice that the Public Gardens opens at 8 o'clock, same time in the morning, and closes at half hour before sunset, which on June 21st is 9 p.m., which is pretty close to our 8 p.m. target. So there is some form of HRM employee in the very close vicinity available to do that. So I wasn't going to say anything about that one, but I thought, hey, I got my 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Any further discussion? Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak at public participation? Are there any further speakers? Third time, any further speakers? Seeing none, we'll declare public participation for item 12.1.3 closed, and we'll bring back up the speakers list. If we can. See if the computer wants to do that today. There There we go. Perfect. Now, I think we're actually going to go to Councillor, I think it was Councillor Out that you had the floor and you suggested we do that. So you're not on the list, but let's go back to you and give you 5 minutes or 3 minutes.
Yeah, no, I actually don't really have anything more to say right now, believe it or not. I have, I wanted to hear what these folks had to say, because I still have a dilemma here. I mean, as I said, I would like to see this work, but I'm just, and I have great confidence in you, Brad, so don't take this personally, when you say that you think you've learned from this and that and others have learned from this. But I just am a little worried that not enough has changed since the pilot that we're going to see it. You know, what is that, doing the same thing and expecting a different result? You know, is not a definition of insanity or something. But anyway, we'll see what others have to say. But I'm a little leery that without some really significant changes, that we're going to see the same thing. We're too dependent on police, as I've said to the beginning. So we'll see what others have to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for staff. So just concerning the feedback throughout this pilot, if it gets approved today, is it going to be proactive by surveying folks? Because you have your data for the transit, but I'm just wondering about all the other considerations that are not transit. So the businesses, the residents, and the commuters, and just all the other considerations. Yeah, I was, the photo radar piece, I think we're going to hear back this year, if I'm remembering correctly about that, but that would be a really good addition for compliance for something like this. Yeah, concerned about the costing as well. It seems to be up in the air. And yeah, I think, yeah, that's it.
Koblenz, Transportation Planning. Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor. In terms of feedback, we are planning a pedestrian intercept survey to get feedback on the streetscape project itself, and we'll be including questions about the experience on the street without motor vehicle traffic as well, as a component of that.
And so what about like the businesses, or will you rely on like complaint-driven feedback, like say from, you know, the president of the Business Improvement District, or is there going to be like proactive surveys provided throughout the course of this?
If this project goes forward, we'll certainly discuss opportunities for doing that with the Business Association, but we will be talking to them about the best way to gain feedback from them and their members. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Just feeling a bit ambiguous about this. I'm confident that if anything goes wrong, just based on last year, it can be shut down quickly. I do think trying new things is good and healthy, but not at the detriment of businesses and cost and other considerations. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We will move next to Councillor Lovelace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the comment. I think that was really helpful to get a better understanding from the Business Association in particular about, you know, your perspectives. And it just made me do a deeper dive again to look at those risks and the risk considerations. You know, because clearly if you look through all those 7 risk considerations, you know, a lot of that actually shows that we're just spreading a problem out around this area, right? We're adding more congestion to those streets, to the side streets, potentially more intersection collisions and issues with pedestrians and so on, and then of course backing up traffic. for those side streets. And I think too, if I look at all of the different road users in that, what does that then do to the vulnerable road users if we're spreading this issue out into a broader area? And how is it that we're actually going to be collecting this data so that we can understand what the issue is? When in actual fact, we kind of already know that there's going to be an issue, right? So I almost feel like we're piloting something, but we already know that there's going to be a lot of problems that we're intentionally causing by doing this. So that's concerning. It's also concerning to me that we would rely on signage when signage does not work. It's concerning to me that we would rely on police when we know that we can't in this instance. And I want to just go back to what Councillor Cleary said, because I think that was a really good point. Why haven't we done the bigger look and the deeper dive into how do we create that work zone, or how do we take the legislation to benefit us to ensure that we actually have control over this situation where, we have individuals where it is their specific job to make sure that we assist those road users to conduct that behavior change that then mitigates the risk to vulnerable road users in particular. And anyway, I'm not very confident on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll go to Councillor Cuddle to close.
I too have a lot of questions about our readiness to move forward with this pilot. In hearing everyone talk, I really see three pieces here that need to be considered and how they fit together. One is about transportation and transportation priority. One is about, stakeholders and the businesses and the residents who live in the area and kind of what their needs are and their definitions of success. And then there's the placemaking aspect of it. As has been mentioned, we've invested a lot of money in this street in terms of placemaking, and do the actions we're proposing here add or detract from the success of this space? We need all three of those pieces to work together, I believe, in order for this to be a success. Signage is one thing, but we have to remember that we want people to come here. We want it to feel inviting. We want this to be a destination. So anything like negative or like do not enter or pieces, like that, I think we have to be very careful in how messaging and communication is done, because I think this needs to be seen as something positive, not negative. And, I'm concerned about our approach with that. Given this, I'd like to make a motion to defer this decision today and request a supplementary report on to look at options that include some kind of physical barrier, additional info on how impacts in the surrounding areas are going to be measured and assessed, looking at pedestrian safety and tools for ensuring pedestrian safety, and also consultation with the local businesses to get their response to the report that has been presented.
Seconded by Councillor Purdy. So deferral is always in order, so we'll wait for that to come up on the computer. And then you can clock in, Councillor Cleary.
Oh, sorry, my computer died here. Hold on. I had, the second one was impacts on surrounding areas. So physical barriers, impacts on surrounding areas, pedestrian safety, and consultation with businesses, with the business community.
Yep. Katie, can you
Yeah,
spin up a
here.
new speakers list while you're...
Um,
So is that the new speakers list there, Katie? So we're on the new list. All right, thank you very much. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a lot of extra work. So definitely looking at some physical barriers, and I think some input from the local business community, but depending on how the consultation goes, as we already know from what Ms. Utek gave us, plus what we've known before, some businesses are for it, some businesses against. Those who are for it, some of them are soft for it. They want to see the pilot, see how it works. And so in terms of consultation, I would hope that would be focused around, the measures that we're implementing. Is this going to work? Not about, are we going to do the pilot or not? That's the thing. The other part is the physical barriers. I do like what Mr. Campbell presented to us, and I think, the physical barriers, having something at each end of the strip, especially taking up just the incoming lane. So if people are coming up Spring Garden Road, orient myself, that would be going west. So if you're coming west, having that lane, that westbound lane blocked will prevent a lot of people from coming in, and a bus can go around it. I like that idea. I still think we need some kind of traffic control at those 3 or 4 or 3 intersections in the middle, and I don't know how we do that, and I hope staff can look at something along those lines, whether it's barrels that people move, and again, that would have to be, at least for the first few weeks of the pilot, physically a bunch of people on site picking up barrels, moving barrels, or, doing something there. But in terms of, the overall project, like I said, I want to see this go ahead. So my question to staff is, can you do this supplementary report and be back to us and do the pilot this year?
So I think I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Anguish.
Yeah, and granted, I only had a few seconds to speak with staff, but, what I can say is the elements that were asked for in the supplementary report are really there for you in this report. Basically, what that report is asking for is a different solution. And so, which that means, yeah, we're out of time. Like, part of the reason, our apologies to Sue Utek and to the bid, part of the reason we're rushed to get here now is to try and salvage this, to make it happen for this summer. We've put before you, we've gone through all those elements. This is the best solution that we have based on these parameters. If the parameters are changed, you say, look, we want to go ahead and look at physical barriers. We want to look at stronger measures. We want you to consider spending some money. Then we can go away and do that, but it's not going to be for this summer, right? And so, and that's what we're hearing from you. You want a better guarantee of success, I think is what most people are saying here, and in which case we're saying we have our best foot forward based on the parameters we've been given, which is to get back here, rerun this again, don't spend a lot of money, and yeah, so that's the net sum of it. It will push it out of this summer in all likelihood. We'll try our best effort, but.
And I figured, based on trying to incorporate some physical barriers when that was not what you were proposing in your second go-round here, would probably push us into next year. hence my question. And certainly, I'm not looking for a guarantee of success. I'm looking for a higher probability that we can do a successful pilot that will give us enough data to say, yes, we should do this permanently, or no, not going to work. This is a challenging area, and I would like to get the pilot as right as we possibly can, and as it pains me that we would lose another year to try it again. But I'll be honest and say, I just don't think we're there yet in terms of making this pilot work. I wish it wasn't the case that drivers in Halifax were a bunch of a-holes. I do wish that. But the reality is, they are. And they're not going to respect just signage. And as much as we would like them to, they ain't. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
A lot to think about there, Councillor Cleary. Thank you for that. Next on the list is Councillor Outfit.
It's a hard act to follow. Councillor Cleary never states how he feels. But you know what? I agree with Councillor Cleary. I'd like to amend the, not about the animals, but about everything else he said. Crazies might be better. But I would rather wait a year and do it right myself. If you can do it sooner, that's fine. But I'd like to amend the, I think this would be a friendly amendment to the deferral, and that would be, I'd also like to simply just put this, so staff will do this. I see a communications plan, and I also want responses to what was raised today. They'll have records of what we've said, they'll have a tape, they'll have the questions that they've diligently been writing down, and I think this should come back with that. And as Sean just said, I think earlier, an imperfect pilot will lead us to imperfect results. And I think we could be a little closer to perfection by waiting. And yes, it may cost some money, and we'll have to decide, well, do we want to do that, Brad? And, you're right bringing this forward now in the way you have, but I just, it's a little too half-baked for me to give it a fair day in court. So, thanks.
Thank you for that, Councillor Outfit. We'll move to Councillor Cuddle.
He had an amendment, a friendly amendment.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, it was typed in and accepted, and I didn't even think. So are there any objections to the mover or the seconder for that amendment? Seeing none. All right. Well, and Councillor Cuddle, do you want to close or do you want to speak now? I don't think you actually spoke on the motion after it was put up, so you can go ahead now.
I haven't spoken to the motion, but I was just going to say very briefly that, it's like short-term pain for long-term gain, right? And I think that's where we want to go. And, I do think it's so important to consult with our stakeholder communities when we implement something that has a serious impact on them. And I wouldn't want to rush it for those reasons either. I think that we also have an opportunity to go back to the province. Brad said he's going to go talk to some people about that again. Maybe in a year's time, we'll have some greater ability to look at traffic direction and enforcement as a piece of the, which is a piece of the puzzle here, not just for this one, but for all our transit initiatives going forward. So I'm happy to see this deferred and for staff to come back with a supplementary report, and I don't think we should be rushing this. I think the worst case scenario is if we have to shut it down again after a couple of weeks and we spend this money for nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lovelace.
Oh, well, thank you. So yes, I agree. I don't want to have to be in a position where we're shutting this down again and after a couple of days. There's there's too many items here that I don't have confidence on. And, I do think we need a little bit more information, more time to consult with the very important stakeholders that are engaged in this with us. So I think that this gives us a better opportunity for staff to kind of look at other options and ensure that we're doing this right. So when the pilot is rolled out, it is successful, and then it's easy going into a full program. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Less hard is, I guess, easier. And there were other people on the list, and they're now off the list, so I will speak from here. The motion, I'm going to speak from here if I may. I'm probably not going to support this because I think we should do the pilot, but I might be able to support it if we amend it a little bit, because right now what it's saying is options that include physical barriers. It's not, I don't think that's giving staff the latitude for, like, if what council's saying is come back with more information, which Brad's already said is already in the report, and then we'll consider it again, that's a waste of staff's time. If the committee is saying go to signals and barricades, that's fine. I mean, like, if we do that, we're probably never going to get rid of it, and that's not a pilot anymore, let's be honest, right? But if that's what you're saying, staff have been suggesting they want to talk about signals probably more than gates. I think this gives too narrow a range of motion or range of opportunities to staff. Are we telling them, come back and we'll think about it again, or are we making something closer to decision? You know what would make us more happy would be if you did this. I cannot make an amendment from the chair. So if someone else wants to punch in and do that, but at this point, the way it's worded right now, I can't support it because I think that we're not given adequate leeway to staff. So if someone wants, I see Councillor Outthit's on. Do you have something to add? Nope. Okay. Oh, sorry. Councillor Outthit.
And good comments, Chair. So I'd be fine after physical barriers, comma, if we put in signalization. And I put in last time, and it didn't get picked up, we said communications plan, but I'd also said responses to today's concerns expressed today. And I think that it's so much, I think we had some good discussions and suggestions today, and I think that would be helpful to staff. So if we added signalization and responses to the concerns raised during the public during the concerns raised today, not by the public per se, but just us and them. So I would just say, and responses raised during the meeting today.
Okay. Yeah,
does that make you feel a little better, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, it should read, I think, for flexibility for staff, that include physical barriers and or signalization.
Fine.
Right? Because.
Yep. And the concerns raised today, if I'm fine moving that, I'll move that then, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Or I guess Patty could say it's friendly.
Is that friendly to Councillor Cuddle and Councillor Purdy?
Yeah, super. Thank you.
All right, we have consensus, perhaps. Sorry, what was that? Can we put it up on the big sharing screen there, Katie? There you go. How wordsmithy do we want to be there? He says to the lawyer. All right, who's left on the list? Nobody's left on the list. All right, we have a deferral is on the floor.
Sorry, responses raised during, responses to concerns raised during, that word there, concerns.
So Councillor Outthit pointed out it should be responses to concerns raised during the March 30th. Okay, very good. Any further discussion on the motion of deferral? Question has been called. All those in favor of the deferral? All those opposed? Carries. Thank you. Thank you, staff, for your amazing work getting it to this point. And sorry we have to ask you for more, but I think that was a very good discussion. So we move on now to 12.1.1, Hammonds Plains Road and Lucasville Road Supplemental Report. Jill Morrison.
That's going to be Roddy.
Roddy. My annotated thing was slightly wrong. It's okay, Katie, I don't blame you. So we'll have presenter 3 on the mic there, and we'll go straight to Roddy.
Good afternoon, Roddy McIntyre, Manager, Traffic Services and Road Safety. We don't have a presentation or anything prepared, so I'm basically here to answer questions on the supplementary report.
Sorry, it says speakers, not presenters. So I guess we'll go to Councillor Lovelace to put the motion on the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I got a little excited there. I thought there was going to be some late breaking news for Lucasville and Hammonds Plains, Roddy. Okay, so I'm going to move that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to, 1, prioritize short-term operational improvements to the signalized intersection, including upgrades to traffic control cabinet and vehicle detection, along with updated signal timing plans, and 2, ensure appropriate longer-term intersection modifications, including accommodation of pedestrians, cyclists, and transit, are appropriately planned for through the development review process. Thank you, Councillor Outhet.
Moved and seconded. Go ahead, Councillor Lovelace.
Thank you. I do appreciate kind of the second look and the opportunities to dig a little bit deeper into this intersection. Since this report was written, the historic church is now a historic property. And very, very pleased to have that in the community. We also know that the Lucasville Greenway project is moving forward quite well. We have a provincial announcement coming up on Monday for that project. Really excited about it. In addition, we have the project that's being developed at the corner that I just spoke recently with one of the development folks who is looking at, as you indicated in this staff report, the new driveways, one on Hammonds Plains and one is on Lucasville, which is going to increase the congestion of that intersection and of that area. And in addition to that, we've got a rock wall on Hammonds Plains Road at the corner of Lucasville, which gets hit a few times a year. I know recently staff went in to kind of push the rocks back up and pull the kind of the wire gates around it to secure that more. But in looking at where that crosswalk is across Lucasville, which will soon have African Nova Scotian designated colors on that crosswalk, and where people are walking to get to the bus stop or walking from the bus stop at Hammonds Plains Road and crossing that intersection. When a vehicle comes down Lucasville Road, that pedestrian is hidden because of that rock wall and because of the placement of that pole. So in looking at the future changes to that intersection and what had been proposed originally, whatever month that was, Roddy, it was a few months ago, I can't even remember, the original report. Right, I was not on this committee then, but you know, in thinking about how it is that that intersection can shift towards and away from where it currently is to make room so that the buses can actually, you know, move up Lucasville or come down Lucasville onto Hammonds Plains Road and so on. It is really tight, and so you know that option, it seems to be there, right? To actually have a new right turning lane, have an expanded storage lane, left turning lane. Are you with me, Roddy? Yeah, okay. So I want to make sure we're on the same page. So clearly there are some changes that are going to come for that intersection, but it's going to come with that development.
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor, yes, the intent would be to coordinate in conjunction with the requirements of the development.
Okay, so I'm good because I'm looking forward to having some changes at that intersection.
All right. Any further speakers? Question's been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? It's a squeaker. It passed. All right. Thanks, Roddy. Thanks for hanging out all day, too. We'll move to 12.1.2, Halifax Transit 2022-23 Quarter 2 KPI Report. Patricia Hughes, Dave Regie. You don't have to come up, Dave.
I'm going to swap chair with Dave. Are you okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's my daughter up there, so I got
Oh, yeah, get out of here. I insist that Brad Anguish leave now. Got your back. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Patricia Hughes, Director of Planning and Customer Engagement at Halifax Transit. I'm presenting the Q2 report. So as a reminder, Q2 means July, August, and September. So the data in the report this time would have been from July, August, September of 2022. So our report focuses on the transit priority outcome areas. There are 4 of those as shown on this slide, and we'll move through them as I go through the presentation. The first priority outcome area is safe and accessible transportation network. There's 5 business plan deliverables for Halifax Transit under this category, 3 of which are now complete, 1 in progress and 1 delayed. So with respect to safe and accessible transportation, a few highlights, things that have been accomplished recently. We did have a partnership with an SLC in December where free rides were provided on December 2nd and 3rd. That was sponsored by an SLC. It was successful. And we did see more than 32,000 passengers taking advantage of that program and riding transit, either conventional bus, access bus, or ferry on those dates. Another highlight, the Student Transit Pass pilot project, which Council is well familiar with. We did move this forward and in January expanded the program to include 6 junior highs who all received their free annual transit pass. So there's now about 4,200 passes out in circulation. So that is phase 2 of the pilot, and we will be back at Council in early fall with an official update and looking for direction on how to proceed to future phases. Another highlight related to safe and accessible transportation would just be an update on our accessible taxi service. In the second quarter, the data shows that there was 962 trips taken, which works out to about 12 a day. And they were slowly ramping up, if you recall, starting with, I think, 4 or 5 vehicles last July and adding. So they did get up to their 10th vehicle in operation by November. That was our requirement, was the potential for 10 vehicles in circulation at a given time. A little bit of data here to show the growth that we've been seeing. I won't go through all of these details, but essentially as service ramped up and as the public became more aware of the system, clearly it's growing by the month. And we only have data there until January. We have recently gotten a number more reports from our service provider, and I can confirm that the service continues to grow. So happy to keep tracking that closely as it is a new service. Moving into our second priority outcome area, connected and healthy long-range mobility planning. 3 deliverables under that, transit priority corridors and rapid transit strategy in progress. And of course, the implementation of the Moving Forward Together plan network changes were postponed this year, as we are all aware. A couple of, I don't think I'd want to call this a highlight, but related to the priority outcome area, we did have service reductions in February with approximately 5% of service was reduced related to our staffing challenges. And I won't read all of the routes that were impacted, but it was significant. So service reductions continue to be in place today. The next priority outcome area is net zero emissions. 2 business plan deliverables, both of which are in progress, moving along. The highlight here is the battery electric bus project. So the Ragged Lake Transit Center tender for construction was issued. It's closing next week. We also had a demo bus on site for internal testing in much of February, so taking advantage of the cold weather. And a feasibility study for hydrogen fuel cells has been tendered, and that has closed and is being evaluated right now. So that project is progressing nicely. And the Innovative Performance Excellence deliverable, 2 deliverables there in progress. The highlight there is the mobile fare payment app that we are all very much looking forward to. So as you're aware, that RFP was approved and awarded to Masabi. And the negotiations with the vendor are now concluded, allowing for phase 1 to begin. So we do expect phase 1 to roll out this summer, and that would be the visual validation of the fare app. Moving into some of the performance measures. So again, Q2, this was July, August, and September. Boardings were up 40% compared to the year before. The average daily boardings were 80,877 on weekdays, 58,261 on Saturday, and 43,443 on Sundays. System-wide on-time performance was 78%. Accessibus operated 11% more trips than in the previous year, and only 67% of customer feedback was resolved within service standards. The mean distance between failures, so this is essentially a bit of a maintenance metric, was 10,975 kilometers, which was a decrease from the year before. The mean distance between service calls was 7,152 kilometers, which was an increase from the year before. Similar metrics for Accessibus was a 39% increase from the year before. The maximum daily number of buses that couldn't complete their scheduled service due to a mechanical defect was 13, and the daily average was 4.7. So that's fairly typical from what we've seen in previous quarterly reports. Maintenance cost was $1.17 a kilometer, which is 17 cents lower than we had budgeted at $1.34. And that is the summary of the quarterly update. Thank you.
Record time. Councillor Cuttle.
Should I put the motion on the
Yes, please.
floor here? All right. There we go. I move that the Transportation Standing Committee accept the report dated February 9th, 2023.
Moved by Councillor Cuttle, seconded by Councillor Lovelace.
Right. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it's great. It's great to get a report on performance indicators, because it gives us, a sense of where we're going, where improvements are being made, and where, things are perhaps slipping a bit. I just had a couple of questions. One is about bus accessibility. And I apologize, my computer died and I had this typed out and I've got chicken scratch to read. So I'm just wondering, one of the things listed there is improvements to bus stops. And I'm just wondering if there's a list of stops that, like how many stops were upgraded, and is there a list of those stops? And is there a list of stops to be upgraded for the next phase? I'm just thinking it would be good to have in the key performance indicator report, a column 2 for what's coming next. It's great at giving a snapshot in time, and I understand the value of that, and that's one way to do these reports. But it also helps to know where. If we're not meeting the target, or where we're going next with this. So I'm just wondering, particularly around the upgrades to bus stops, is there somewhere I can find that information? The other question was, I'm looking at the decline on time service. I mean, I know it's only 4%. So it's not a huge decrease, but I'm also wondering, what is the standard we're trying to achieve? So having some context around some of these key performance indicators would also be an important way for us to evaluate, where we are and where we need to get to. I didn't find that in the report. It might have been in there, but didn't find that. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. The bus stops, we don't normally provide a lot of metrics in the quarterly reports. We usually save that for the year-end report, which comes with Q4, where we have a pie chart that shows how many have been upgraded to accessible. The reason we do that is because they span the construction season, and quite often they're still in progress, and we don't know which ones are complete. So I don't have that list in this report. It will be in the Q4, and I don't have the exact numbers of how many were upgraded with me today. We have in recent years started the practice of providing a list on our website of every bus stop that's going to be touched that year. So we usually do that in the spring as we're working with vendors and making the list and finalizing the list. So that's not ready for this year yet. But there is a page on the website now that you can look and see which bus stops were upgraded with accessibility improvements last year. So I can certainly send additional information about that and look to seeing a way to include more information in the quarterly reports in the future. We've just typically looked at it annually before. And in terms of the schedule adherence, and some context, the target that we've set is 85%. That is in the attachment, but it is a bit buried. And I would say compared to last year, we have pulled out a few routes in isolation and looked at kind of what's happening, and have found in the instances where we're digging into it that we're seeing higher traffic congestion than last year on those bus routes. And so we are finding areas where the running time was sufficient and is no longer. So we're looking to adjust some of those.
Okay. Yeah, and just back to the reporting, I mean, it does say in the report, it says complete, and it does say that 50 were done, and just putting in some extra metrics would just be helpful in terms of knowing if we're tracking, like how we're tracking in the quarters. That'd be useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cuttle. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, staff, for this. So a number of things kind of jump out at me when you look at, obviously, Accessibus, that's amazing, and the taxi part of that. But also just our regular daily boardings. Like, we're 80% of pre-COVID ridership on conventional. And when I'm looking at the quarterlies for average daily boardings, weekday, Saturday, Sunday. And Q2 this year, 43,000 boardings. Q4 2020, so this is just before pandemic, 33,000. We actually have more Sunday riders than we did pre-pandemic. Saturday, it's up as well. Weekdays not quite there. So are you guys doing some analysis quantitatively and qualitatively of folks riding buses today? Because if you talk to the downtown businesses, many of them are still struggling just because we haven't completely revitalized our downtown in terms of residential development. So you still have a lot of people, if you look at the data they look at, Mondays are down, Fridays are down, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, people are in the offices. So clearly there's a lot of work commuting that isn't happening by bus on the weekday. And maybe some of those weekend trips are work-related, I don't know, but maybe they're recreational, maybe they're leisure, maybe they're going to a park, I have no idea. Is there any way to dig into some of that? Because I think what we're getting is some medium-term change in how people travel, when they travel and why they travel. And to look at weekends being higher than pre-pandemic, I mean, it's fantastic. I can't explain it. I'm postulating some ideas, but it would be great to understand, because obviously weekend service is different than weekday service. And I haven't gone through the whole report to see route by route the changes, and I haven't looked at the times when buses are full. But it looks like we're actually doing quite well, especially when you look at some other conventional transits around North America. Any comments around those things?
Certainly, and I would say we have looked at a number of different sources of data and done some analysis throughout the pandemic. So one thing we can and have done is done ridership analysis at a bus stop level. So which bus stops are performing, having higher or lower boardings than they were before. But it's probably been a year since we really looked at that closely, so I don't know if that has shifted at all. We've also seen data come from places like StatsCan and from the transit app providers even, so there's been a number of sources kind of looking and analyzing those patterns. I wouldn't be able to provide any conclusions based on that today, in my head, but definitely there are some sources of data that we can look at that paint part of that picture, but I would say it is a complex situation. And we are trending, these are the Q2 numbers. I'd say currently we're probably on weekdays sitting at about 85% pretty comfortably. We know that is higher than most cities in Canada of our size. I'm not sure that there's many at all that are at that same level.
Well, and what people may not understand is if you look at kind of 2017, 18, 19, it was growing. So if you actually compare where we are now to where we were in 2017, 2018, we're like on par. So because of the changes with the Moving Forward Together plan, we saw massive increases in ridership in those several years. And so it may sound like, oh, we're only up to 80 or 85% maybe currently of pre-pandemic. But if you go a year or two before pandemic, we're actually kind of at the same level. And so that gives me all kinds of excitement. Last quick question. When fare management comes in, electronic fare management, and we have the app, because I'm thinking about data collection, will people who get on a bus show when we actually get the readers, will they scan their app on a bus and then when they transfer to the next one, scan it again? Because what we don't get right now is kind of that whole route that they take to where they go. We know how many people get on a bus, how many people get off a bus. But will we now start to get information once we get the readers? Obviously, because I think in the initial phase, it's just showing the bus driver, I got the pass. Can we track people, okay, they got on Route 9 and then they got on Route 1, and so it gives us some better insight into kind of where they're coming from, where they're going.
Yeah, so we would call that a linked trip. So you're making a trip, but with several pieces to it, and we would be able to, my understanding is we would have that information.
So Mr. Regie wants to chime in too.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a quick comment on the observation about the Sunday ridership growing quicker. Obviously, analysis to be done with our particular situation, but what I can say is across the country, what we've seen is that a lot of post-COVID ridership growth has actually come from traditional 9-to-5 commuter work trips. So that kind of lines up that, you're seeing that growth Sundays and Saturdays as well. The reality is during our traditional, weekday commute times, a lot of people working 2 days a week at home. So I think that's why you're seeing that growth stunted, where you're seeing the growth in the weekends. And keep in mind as well, we've also seen significant population growth, which I think is being reflected in those weekend trips. But obviously some local analysis to be done, but that's kind of the national picture.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. I'm here because of this report, and I think you can guess where I'm ultimately going to go. People take the bus because they can pay for it, which is great to have the app, and it's great to have cash still accepted. They go because it goes where they need it to, and that's fantastic. And there are some changes, and there can be more, and I'm going to ask a little bit later on, but not during this meeting, for one of them. We've already talked about a circle route around Sackville. And it goes when they need it to. And if it doesn't go when they need it to, or where they need it to, or if they can't pay for it, then they aren't going to use it. And so the reason I'm here is because of the on-time performance, and that is down 4%. It is way below the expected service standard of 85%. If someone does have a linked trip, it multiplies their chance of being late for wherever they want to go, because either the bus they're on will be late, or the one that they're getting on afterwards will be late. I'm wondering, and we see it on a per route basis. I'm wondering if you've done the analysis on a per day basis of when trips might be late. I'm wondering if you've looked at why they're late and what could be done to improve that. If the ridership doesn't trust that they will be able to get to where they want to go, then they will not use it. Two other questions. One of them, the Ragged Lake tender was just issued, or is this going back to July, August, September of last year when it was issued? Because I've regularly mentioned that perhaps something could be done to consider hydrogen with that terminal, and I'm just wondering if that actually made it into the designs, and there might not have been enough time for that, and that's fair. And the final point is on service reductions that happened earlier this year. I'm wondering how much lead time did passengers have before they knew that the service which service would be reduced. So you announce the reductions on the first of a month, and then when through the month or the next month would the service be reduced, so that again, they can still plan their trip. They know where it's going to be, they know when it's going to be, and it would just help the ridership out. Thank you.
I'll start at the end and work my way backwards, but the service reductions in February, going off recollection, I believe it was the latter part of January that we started providing the public information. At that point, it was a table that showed which trips would be removed, and it was later in February where we began communicating it in a more extensive way, including with the printed riders guides and updating all the schedules on the website. But there was information out in late January about that with the specific trips.
So that was about a month?
About a month. So the changes were
Okay.
February 27th.
Okay.
The Regulate tender, the tender that is posted currently is for the construction. So there was a design tender that came before. So I'm not sure of the dates off the top of my head, but that's probably what you'd be referring to last July. So we've been involved in a design phase for a period of time now. The tender for the construction is what's on the procurement site now, closing next week. I would have to look at it in more detail to see. Really, the focus of that is the expansion part is for the electric buses that are on their way, and that was really the focus and the intent of that. For the schedule adherence data, we do look at it on a per-day basis. We look at it internally weekly. And in terms of why and what's causing the problems, we have recently started a bit of an initiative or a project to go back through all of the running times for each segment to see which ones are performing the worst and what's happening, so that we can, which is more of, I guess, not a route level, it's more of a global level, from A to B and C to B and everything, which sections are the ones that we're having the most challenges with that they need to be updated. So we are actively looking at that now. I will say that some of them, even compared to last year, as I mentioned previously, do need more time than they had at this time last year. So we're undertaking that kind of broader analysis right now to try to determine a way to improve that schedule adherence.
Okay, would indicators of that come to this committee?
Yes.
When they are determined? Okay. Because again, if people don't trust the bus service, then they won't use it. One of the things that other...
Councillor, you're at time.
1 point.
Okay.
One of the things that other municipalities have done they made it easier to not drive into the downtown core, and then they made it harder to drive in the downtown core. What we have done, it seems, is make it harder to drive in the downtown core, and with the on-time and therefore reliability and trustability factor being reduced, we need to work on that to make it easier to not drive before we make it harder to drive. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just picking up on a couple of things Councillor Russell mentioned. And I'm not entirely sure that is the reason for some of the on-time performance reduction, or in fact, some of the routes have actually on-time performance increases. Maybe Councillor Russell will be happy to know that the number 8 Sackville actually went up. So it's more on time now than it was, or not now, but in quarter 2 than it was in quarter 1, up to 73%, it was at 71. And if you look at some of the routes that have gone down dramatically, the 51, the 59, these are not yet anywhere near downtown. These are like Windmill, Colby. And so, there could be some idiosyncrasies just within those routes over those time periods. I have no idea of construction, other things. But I'm sure you guys are doing some analysis on that. The one that I'm really interested, though, because we talked about it several times at council, was the Route 55 Port Wallace. It's actually improved dramatically, up to like 89% on time. That's the one that goes on Craigburn, if people forget that one. Any explanation? I don't know if you have that kind of analysis at your fingertips. Any idea why that one went up so much in terms of its on-time performance in the quarter? compared to last year? Did it have anything to do with like rerouting it, shortening it? I'm just curious.
No, I wouldn't have a response to that today, sorry.
All right, just putting it out there for folks. Maybe Kathy's listening at home.
Got anything else there, Councillor Cleary?
Have you done any kind of work looking at the specific routes that are sort of going down or up on time? Some of them quite dramatically, from like a 78 to an 89. Other ones the opposite way, unfortunately, from a 68 down to a 52, the 59. That's the Colby.
We have done some analysis. Some of them is, well, sorry. I think we do expect some changes shortly after a large implementation. So for example, when we made significant changes to all of the routes going to Lacewood Terminal in 2018, almost all of them were touched again in 2019 to adjust schedules. So that's whenever you're changing the pattern, significantly changing what you do at an intersection, we're making estimated assumptions on running time based on what the routes in the area are doing. But when they change, maybe we're off by a bit in some places. So it's not unusual to have newer routes need a second go the following year. So I think we're seeing that with a lot of our Portland Hills area ones now, now that they're realigned, it makes sense to take another look at them in their current configuration to check on them. The other thing we're seeing is, unsurprisingly, some of the longer routes that have more space between time points have more variability. And often if it's just variable by 5 or 6 minutes, that means to have them on time more than 80% of the time, it also means that they would be ahead of that schedule quite often and laying over for a long time. So it's kind of that balance, particularly with the longer routes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. We'll move to Councillor Lovelace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question on that. Because as we see some of these routes dropping from last year, and we see issues along that route, I'm just wondering whether or not we have an understanding of construction impact. In particular, that's just on the street, on the word, that's what I'm hearing from 433 last year when we had the issue with the roundabout. This year, we got the issue with the roundabout number 2, that the unreliability of the service, which is being impacted by the congestion because of the construction, et cetera, et cetera. So we're losing ridership because of that. So I'm just wondering, it's anecdotal, but what kind of metrics do you have or data do you have to understand the impact of construction on ridership?
I would say we don't have a great deal of data. It very much is a factor of staff being aware of the construction happening because it typically impacts our bus routes, and so we have awareness of it, and kind of we were well aware of the roundabout construction and the impact on the 422 last year, or 432 last year. So it's very much anecdotal, as you've said, and knowing that certain areas, like when Spring Garden Road was under construction, we knew that all of those routes had schedule adherence impacts that were fairly significant.
And then, of course, there's multiple issues, right? So last year we had the roundabout, we had also the Halifax Water Project and Hammonds Plains Road. We also had another Hammonds Plains Road project with Halifax Water. And so it was compounded where you've had these massive, construction sites for one bus route, the 433, was continuously delayed. And so I'm looking at the numbers and I'm just wondering how, whether or not that's going to come back up again. But also, those bus stops were moved because of the construction. They haven't gone back yet. So just wondering, just around communications of that to help people understand. And that's where I think the app really could help us, right? To be able to communicate to people on that. And it's really unfortunate that here we are trying to get more and more people on transit, and then we're reducing the service. I can't tell you how many times people have said, I wish I could use the bus, but they cut my service. So anyway, thank you so much for this, and I appreciate having this. But just the follow up on those bus stops would be great. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I'm going to speak from the chair. The thing that's hitting me when we're talking about unreliability because of construction is we need a metric. I'm looking at Bill because he's one of the people we might hire to do that. We need a metric on how the construction is impacting all the traffic, right? I mean, like, I think about some of the routes going into Dartmouth, Portland, Burnside, and you can get in your car if you want, but you're going to be stuck in the same traffic that the bus is. And so that would be interesting, so that we could have some kind of, like, are we lagging behind single occupant vehicles and other vehicles or not? I don't know how you do that. That's just kind of interesting thing to think about. I've cut most of my questions myself. I'll speak from the chair, but in the interest of time, because we still have another item. Thanks, Sean. The Accessibus eligibility criteria in the business plan deliverables says that's delayed, and I know that's delayed. And do we have an idea when that would be renewed? Is that coming forward in the business plan? I'll just throw the three out right quick. And then the next one is assessment for elimination of internal combustion engine vehicles in progress. That's the light fleet, I take it. That's like supervisors and repair trucks going around. And then last one was the fixed route programming, scheduling, operations, complete implementation. The go live is planned for February 2024. That's scheduling of bus and ferry operators, right? That's crew, not just scheduling. It's like a complete thing of these are the routes. And so how does that impact? So we're going to have a new system. Is that immediately implementable, or is that an ongoing discussion with the ATU to be able to change the way, will it change the way people are assigned work? Thank you. I think Dave wants to jump in on those.
Thank you. So in terms of I'll start with the scheduling software project. So basically, we, like any transit system of any size, has a very specialized suite of software that you use to schedule the service, schedule all the shifts for operators, all that kind of thing. So basically right now, the system we've been using is quite old. It's well out of date. So this is really an upgrade to a new system that will allow us to continue doing that. Various benefits, more user-friendly, better algorithms in the back creating the work, but it doesn't change the collective agreement provisions. It's about having a modern software package for that. And what's your second question? Oh, right, the eligibility criteria. So yeah, we're having a harder look at that now. There's been a few things. I mean, the continuous improvement program came to council quite some time ago for approval, and there's been some interesting developments in the industry in terms of some human rights challenges and things like that around some of that stuff. So we're having a second look at that to see how that proceeds, and I think. What you're going to see coming to council sometime likely this year is a bit of an update on where we are around the Accessibus Continuous Improvement Program, some potential changes we might want to make, just because, I mean, it's been, I don't know, 4 or 5 years probably since we brought that, if not longer. So that's why you're seeing that there. We're taking a little bit of a pause on that to regroup, I guess, basically is the best way I'd put it, and make sure that what we're doing is the best approach forward in terms of, respect for our clientele, respect for, what impacts there might be under human rights around that sort of thing. So more to come on that.
And fleet is light fleet?
Yes.
All right, that's it for me. There's nobody on the speakers list. Anyone want to call the question? Question's been called. All those in favor? Carries. Thank you. That's the end of our regular staff business. We'll move to members of the Standing Committee. 12.2.1, Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll move that the Transportation Standing Committee request a staff report on the development of a structured and proactive approach to plan, design, and evaluate infrastructure projects that is consistent with the objectives of the Integrated Mobility Plan. This approach would be based on the complete streets hierarchy of priorities as outlined in the Integrated Mobility Plan's inverted triangle, which is on page 56 of the IMP, for all complete streets infrastructure projects involving pedestrians, cyclists, transit users, goods movement, and the transportation by private vehicle with appropriate weight given to the equity servicing population as outlined in the Integrated Mobility Plan pillars. It would also consider the type of street and its functional area as a, in quotes, link or as a place in the transportation network.
Moved by Councillor Cleary, seconded by Councillor Outhill. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you. And this, I'm looking over at Mr. Campbell, who Bill and Talon came here and gave us a presentation not that long ago, and made some very good criticism of some of the projects and the way they're moving through. And I think, looking at that presentation and turning that into a motion was really about how transparent, and if we have a plan, we say we're going to do things, and then we do them. and they may not always line up, or at least from the public's perspective, they may not line up with what we said we were going to do. And so I think being more transparent and setting out a plan and ensuring we're consulting appropriately with stakeholders, taking that input, and communicating back and saying, in a particular area, yes, in our overall system, pedestrians are more important than, say, cars or buses. But there may be some particular parts where you have to give equal weighting, or maybe transit's more important in that area. We don't do a very good job of communicating that when we're doing them, and maybe our staff and our consultants and engineers may not have that in mind when they're developing the projects. And the only way to ensure that that gets done is to have that embedded in the process by which we go forward. And so this motion, I drafted it based on the presentation, but ran this through our staff, who did make some changes to make sure that the wording worked with what our plan is, and also that it was feasible to implement from a staff perspective in terms of, here's our priorities, here's who gets the right-of-way, how do we build new projects that meet those? And so I think this is a good way to move forward, ensuring we're accountable, ensuring we're transparent in the way we build new infrastructure and renovate the infrastructure that we do have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll move to Councillor Lovelace.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, renovation for sure. Like rethinking the use of that space. And I think thank you for this, because I think this is just such an excellent example of how important community involvement is in the work that we do at the municipality, and the public participation, which is greatly appreciated, because, we don't know what we don't know. And so having a new perspective and being able to listen and then kind of reassess, wait a minute, are we doing this? No, we're not. Well, why not? Because this is a commitment that the municipality has made. So thank you for putting this forward, Councillor Cleary, and thank you so much, Bill, for all that you have done over the years to keep us right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lovelace. Councillor Cuddle. Oh, no. Yeah, Cuddle, sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In reading through this motion, my note on it was, why is this necessary? And it's not just the IMP, it's every strategy we have in terms of how it gets implemented and accounted for. And we've had this discussion at council. I know I've raised the issue that we need to have a different way of doing staff reports where it actually outlines in the staff report what strategies are being addressed. I was getting very tired of hearing that for every strategy we needed to hire more staff people, because actually what strategies are supposed to do is inform how things are done in the municipality in every facet of the municipality. And, whether it's the Halifax plan, whether it's integrated mobility, the other 25 strategies that that we have on the table, and I think we do a poor job of looking for the opportunities in every action we take to advance our strategic initiatives. So while I'm quite happy to see this motion come forward, it raises questions about how we do things in general. We passed the integrated mobility plan. It should be considered in the work that's being done, and if it's not, I think that's a bigger systemic question. Because do we do this for every strategy we have, and for every report? Like, what's missing? So what's missing in this motion is like how does a project perhaps relate to other initiatives we're carrying forward, or strategies we're trying to push forward. So, I like it and I support it because I think it gets to kind of the crux of the problem particular to the integrated mobility plan. But I also think that it leaves out a lot of other pieces, and that I think we need to take a step back altogether. And I'm hoping, with the new CAO, who is, from my work on the Water Commission, I know is very strategy-minded, key performance indicator-minded. She measuring success and looking at how we can make continuous improvements. That perhaps we have a new way of of working with our strategic initiatives and ensuring accountability and transparency in how they're implemented. So I will support, this motion that's on the floor, but I think it's only, the tip of the iceberg or the bottom of the inverted pyramid in regards to where we need to go with the implementation of our strategic initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Move to Councillor Purdy.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for that, because I was like, what is this asking for? I wasn't sure. So it's basically for the staff reports to have more information on how the projects are going to be implemented and the communication piece surrounding that and how it's accounted for. That's what this is asking for. So more.
With the IMP is the lens.
Okay, I feel conflicted about this because,
You don't like the IMP.
well, I feel like the IMP is contributing to a lot of our traffic issues that is causing headaches to all of our commuters. So I'm a little, well, yeah, I know there's a lot of impacts, but certainly the IMP-informed infrastructure changes that we've seen in Cole Harbour could have been mitigated greatly by an enhanced communication plan in the community. It was just, they were blindsided we all were blindsided and not, yeah. So I will tentatively support this motion as the more information, the better, and it is a strategy that has been adopted. So, okay, thanks.
I'll speak from the chair if I may. I'm going to take first I'm going to take a slightly contrary position. I agree, I'm going to support it. These are the kind of things that you need to do, but some of the stuff council votes on is a think piece, or that it generally guides future work, and that's going to come up with an implementation plan. And then some of it is things like a regional plan or a secondary municipal plan. That's the law, right? So the integrated mobility plan was our first cut at trying to act on what is in the regional plan, where it says we are going to prioritize all these forms of movement of mobility over a single occupant vehicle. First time that appeared in policy in Halifax was 2014. And the very next year, actually, a professor at Dal was challenging me in front of his class going, nothing's changed yet. Well, of course not. It's a generational change. Generational change can take a long time. So we did the IMP, and I want to point out, while this particular reporting piece is well spotted by Bill and the folks at Walk and Roll, there's 129 items to do that were called for in the integrated mobility plan, and I think 89 of them are done, and there's only 12 that haven't even started yet. So, and to Councillor Purdy, I would say the classic line that comes to mind at this point is was it Barnum and Bailey, one of those circus guys? You can please some of the people some of the time, and some of the people all the time. You can't please all the people all the time, right? And so the line that was said to me right after I first got elected had been said by gleefully by some staff who had heard the radio clip, was Mayor Nenshi in about a year previously in Calgary had been asked on radio, on talk radio, well, what do we do about traffic and the fact that there's more traffic and things are slower and there's more congestion? And he responded and said, and this is important, name a city where it's getting better that's growing. Doesn't happen. It's just not going to happen. So what the IMP calls for is managing transit or transportation and mobility, and really trying to find alternatives, which will take years and decades to build, but that we're launching right now. We need to move faster on those. So I think this is a really good piece. This is something, I think this is a kind of a natural outgrowth of all the things that have happened from IMP that we've spent money on and that we're building and that we're doing, is we need to very clearly identify to the public, here's how this report advances the integrated mobility plan and meets that policy goal. So I thank Councillor Cleary for it, I thank Bill for it, and I'll call for the question. Or someone can call for the question, he's not the chair. It's been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? Passes. Good stuff, everyone. We're through the regular part of the agenda. There's no motion. Section 13, in camera, will take a motion to approve the minutes. Moved by Councillor Cleary, second by Councillor Lovelace. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries. That was the in-camera minutes 14-1. There are no added items. Any notices of motion from council or committee? No notices of motion? Public participation, note to Bill, you can't speak twice. Anybody else in the audience wish to speak?
Our next meeting is today, I see.
No, Katie caught that, so there's no public participation, there's no one here to speak. I'll ask second and third time, any public participation, any further public participation? Seeing none, the clerk caught that. The date of the next meeting is April 27th, 2023. I'll take an adjournment. Adjourned by the fine representative from Cole Harbour. We are adjourned.